So when a school superintendent is actually caught stealing political campaign signs, what actually happens? Well, in the North Kitsap School District just a few days ago, local citizens caught the superintendent of the local school district red-handed, or I should actually say greasy-handed, caught stealing campaign signs that were posted by a local citizen group opposed to a property tax increase proposal that she obviously supports. Now, the police are involved. The local paper has covered the story, and I think we need to just dig into these details and tell you what happened. Now, first a background. If you don't live in Washington State, public schools are mostly funded by local property taxes that are imposed on every piece of property every year. Local school districts have additional expenses that they're allowed to ask local voters to support, and these are often placed on the ballot during a special election date. It's in February every year. And this is always a low participation time of year for elections, but Washington State mails out ballots to voters, so the entire election process is actually done by mail. Now, this year's special election date is February 13th, and the ballots have been mailed to everybody in those districts who are participating. According to the Secretary of State's office, 36 of the 39 counties have at least one district participating in the special elections this year, with approximately 239 measures on the ballot right now. So roughly 45.5% of potential voters are impacted by at least one of these measures. Now, in most school districts, they're asking voters to approve either school levies, which are property taxes imposed on local property owners who live in that school district, and then these funds are used to supplement the taxes the state already uses for your local school district. And then, of course, they provide these extra funds theoretically used to fund extra activities, sports, special pay for teachers, and other activities, which a local school district has then chosen to fund. So some districts might be asking for special levies to pay for technology, which is usually in theory tax dollars specifically directed to fund computers maybe, and then often staff to help maintain the additional computers used in the classroom. Now these regular levies are placed on the ballot every 2 or 4 years, kind of depending on the school district. There are often also school bond campaigns, which are actually distinguished from school levies for several reasons. First, these are voter-approved debt. It's typically for 20 to 25 years, which school districts would incur for capital projects. That's defined as usually like a building or remodeling a school building. Now, secondly, because of strong activism from Washington voters for over 100 years now, despite repeated efforts by political insiders, the threshold of approving these taxes must be over 60%. And this is kind of unusual for Washington. So this is what the voters in the North Kitsap School District are actually voting on right now, which is a capital bond increase to build and remodel some school buildings. Now, sometimes the local citizens are just not happy with these tax increase proposals. So local voters will organize a formal no campaign against the tax increase. Usually, even a marginal campaign in opposition to a school bond campaign will probably ensure the failure of that tax proposal. As the Seattle Times has documented in the past, when you actually look at this chart here, posted here, school bond tax proposals have failed a majority of the time since 2009. And you have to go back to 2019 actually to find a year when the majority, at least the most recent year, when the majority of these bonds were actually approved by the voters. I believe tough economic times kind of reduces the desire of local people to support expensive government projects. Now, personally, I like the 60% threshold because our political insiders, whether they're in DC and Olympia or even the local public school district office, they really need to be capable of making the case to the public, and they will not waste or squander the tax dollars that they're always wanting to take for their next grandiose project. And I believe basically a higher threshold of approval above 60% kind of ensures these political insiders, they just have to do a better job of producing more rational proposals, more realistic plans, and they are forced, usually kind of against their will or inclination, to engage the community in a more thorough and honest way. So this 60% threshold is really just a minor check and balance on an often out-of-touch bureaucracy. So now back to the North Kitsap School District, which is located mostly in Kitsap County on the shores of Puget Sound, kind of surrounded by beautiful Puget Sound. There was actually a vote no on the school bond campaign there. And by the way, this wasn't just some malcontent who didn't want to pay for higher property taxes. We actually have a lot of local native tribes in our state, for example, and the local Squamish tribe, according to their very own public posts on the subject, they are actively in opposition to this proposal as well. Now, in their case, this is mainly because they appear to feel slighted by the school district's refusal to address their concerns about a school located on their reservation land. But I had spoken to some of these people who were actually running this no campaign, and they were frustrated with their campaign signs being frequently stolen from the right-of-way and from county land, where anyone can post campaign signs legally. So they set up game cameras and were parking nearby when, just like clockwork, another sign thief came by, hopped out of their truck, stole just the no campaign signs, leaving the yes campaign signs behind, of course, and then drove away. Now, these local activists, they actually took photos of the vehicle, they identified the license plate, and they reported it to the police right as it was happening. So they knew the vehicle drove into Paulsbo, which is a small town nearby. And so these activists drove around until they actually found the thief's truck parked at the Sons of Norway facility, which is where a Rotary meeting was in progress right at that time, and the Paulsbo police were called. So according to the local newspaper, it appears the driver of that truck, which contained the stolen signs in the back, was none other than local North Kitsap School District Superintendent Lorian Evans. And this is her photo here. So now at this point, Superintendent Evans is, of course, denying that she did it at the time, as both the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office and the Paulsbo Police, because it was stolen in the county and then recovered, the signs were recovered in the Paulsbo, they appear to be reporting that she's denying this. But the evidence seems pretty solid at this point. And while I'm sure that both police departments would rather be spending their time maybe confronting criminals stealing cars, robbing people, and committing other violent crimes, it's still illegal for people, even if they're Rotarians and school superintendents, to steal the campaign signs from people just because they don't like them. Now, listen, political sign thefts, basically, during campaign season, this is not unusual. People always get angry when they discover their volunteer time spent putting up signs and raising money to pay for those signs is just casually stolen and wasted by their political opponents. Listen, I've been up till the sun rose in the morning several times putting up signs all night long, so I know how that feels. Now, sometimes there are arguments made with some validity where maybe somebody's removing the sign just from their own front property, but that issue and that objection that has been raised in the past, that isn't germane actually to the specific example. What is interesting here is the highest paid employee of the school district. Now, usually these positions are actually compensated at over a couple $100,000 per year. And yes, I'm sure that she wants some new fancy buildings in the district, but that doesn't give her permission just to steal the signs from her political opponents just because she doesn't like their message. Now, I'll also point out that a paid employee of the school district always runs into additional problems if it's revealed that she used her paid time as an employee to be a sign thief. Now, specifically, this is a violation of Washington State's campaign finance laws, RCW 42-17A 555. But in this specific example, she apparently stole the signs early in the morning before her Rotary meeting at the Sons of Norway building. So people who have read my website articles kind of over the years right here, you know that I reported extensively about the former Moses Lake superintendent who was caught stealing money from his school district. And I'll actually link to that story from basically a few years back down below. And while I don't believe that it's super common, even highly compensated people like this in positions of trust and power, they're clearly willing to do dishonest and bad things under certain circumstances. Now, we should hold them to a higher standard, particularly considering their responsibility for ensuring our children are held to some type of standard as well. I mean, we're paying their salaries. So in addition, we've actually seen other politicians in the past who were caught stealing signs. Some of you might even remember the story here about the former head of the Grays Harbor County Democratic Party, who was an elected county commissioner at the time, caught on camera in between his meetings, well, right in the middle while wearing his suit, stealing signs of political opponents that he didn't like. So North Kitsap School District Superintendent Evans is clearly not alone in doing bad things. However, while the police continue to interview and investigate Superintendent Evans, we can all learn some lessons here, and I want to close this video with just a few basic suggestions. Now, first, I want to call out the local activists who caught the superintendent stealing signs. They showed up, and they took photos, and they documented the violations, and they helped the police confirm the facts of this case. It's actually hard to run a no campaign like this, particularly with the distributed cost, concentrated benefits challenge when confronting pro-tax increase efforts. I mean, those who actually stand to benefit are always going to be more aggressive and motivated than those who will be squeezed by the proposed tax increase. The pro-tax campaign doesn't always send people out to steal their opponent's signs, but their motivations are obvious, and this can motivate people, even sometimes good people, to do bad things at times. However, I will suggest just a few new techniques using maybe AirTags or some similar low-cost tracking devices, and you can often verify that the perpetrator's even easier than you might otherwise experience in some other way. Game cameras are always a nice touch, and I appreciate the fact that these guys are willing to take photos. Now, finally, just to Superintendent Evans and the other people who have not been caught and exposed yet, listen, you're lucky to be caught, not to be caught sooner, but it is usually best to come clean, just apologize, and go and sin no more. Secondly, it is probably a good idea to just advise others not to try to do the same tactic. It's really never worth it. Just run effective campaigns and work hard to promote your cause or your politician. Cheaters don't prosper, and they usually fail, so it really isn't worth doing bad things like this. Now, the North Kitsap School District Superintendent Evans wouldn't have been caught if the local citizens hadn't been willing to show up and expose the truth. This is just another example of how people who are willing to show up are able to make a real difference and impact their community. Because, as I always say on the show, the future clearly belongs to those who show up.